The planet Arendor 7 was a place where hope went to die. Its cracked surface stretched endlessly, covered in jagged rocks and swirling dust storms that made the air feel heavy. The sky above was an eerie shade of orange, dotted with two suns, that cast long shadows over the ruins of what had once been a thriving human colony. Now it was nothing more than a graveyard of broken buildings and rusted machinery, remnants of a time when humanity thought it could conquer any world. Lieutenant Daniel Carter stood at the edge of one such ruin, his boots crunching against the dry soil as he surveyed the desolation around him. He was a tall man with short brown hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His uniform was worn but clean, patched up after countless missions like this one. Behind him, 4 other members of his team moved cautiously through the wreckage, their weapons drawn but not raised. They were here for answers, not a fight, though none of them doubted that trouble might find them anyway. Dr. Laura Bennett adjusted her goggles and knelt beside a pile of debris. She was shorter than Daniel, with curly blonde hair tied back into a messy bun. Her hands moved deftly over the ground, picking up bits of metal and scanning them with a handheld device. Unlike the soldiers, she carried no weapon, only tools and instruments designed to uncover secrets hidden beneath layers of dirt and time. "Anything useful?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. Laura shook her head without looking up. "Not yet. But there's definitely something odd about these readings. The energy spikes we've been tracking, they're stronger here." She tapped a few buttons on her scanner, frowning slightly. "It's almost like the planet itself is alive." Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he scanned the horizon, his gaze lingering on the jagged peaks in the distance. Something about this place felt wrong, not just because it was abandoned or dangerous, but because it seemed to watch them. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional howl of wind whipping through the ruins. Even the dust seemed unnatural, clinging to everything like a second skin. "Keep moving," Daniel said finally, gesturing for the others to follow. "We need to get deeper inside. If there's anything left of the old colony's systems, we'll find it there." The group pressed onward, weaving through crumbling walls and shattered windows. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of the planet itself was pressing down on them. Corporal Ethan Blake brought up the rear, his rifle slung across his chest. He was younger than the rest, barely out of training, but eager to prove himself. Beside him walked Samantha Cole, the medic, her face set in a determined expression despite the unease creeping into everyone's minds. They reached what appeared to be the central hub of the old colony, a massive dome-shaped structure half buried under rubble. Its glass panels were cracked and opaque, letting in faint beams of light that illuminated the interior. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the floor was littered with debris. Control panels lined the walls, most of them smashed beyond repair, but a few still flickered weakly with dying power. "This must have been the command center," Laura murmured, running her fingers along a console. "If we can get even one of these working, we might be able to access some records." Daniel nodded. "Blake, Cole, start clearing the area. Make sure nothing's hiding in the corners. Dr. Bennett, see what you can salvage from those panels." As the others spread out, Daniel took a moment to study the room. It was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of electricity coming from somewhere deep within the walls. For a brief second, he thought he heard something, a faint click, like footsteps. But when he turned, there was nothing there. Shaking off the feeling, he joined Laura at the nearest console. "I think I've got something," she said excitedly, her voice cutting through the tension. "This panel still has residual power, if I can reroute it." Before she could finish, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Everyone froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the noise. At first it sounded like distant thunder, but then it grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered violently. "What the hell is that?" Ethan demanded, raising his rifle. "No idea," Daniel replied, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm holstered at his hip. "Stay sharp." The rumbling stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Then, from the shadows near the far wall, a figure emerged. It was tall, much taller than any human, and its body gleamed with a metallic sheen. Its limbs were long and segmented, resembling those of an insect, and its head was elongated, with multiple glowing eyes that pulsed faintly. Despite its alien appearance, it moved with deliberate grace, each step calculated and precise. For a moment, nobody moved. The creature tilted its head, studying them with an unreadable expression. Then, without warning, it spoke, not with words, but directly into their minds. The voice was cold and mechanical, yet strangely calm. "Why don't you flee?" The question hung in the air, reverberating through their thoughts. Laura gasped, clutching the edge of the console for support. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle, his finger hovering over the trigger. Samantha stepped back instinctively, her medical kit clutched tightly to her chest. Daniel, however, remained perfectly still. He stared at the creature, his jaw clenched but his posture relaxed. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his hand from his weapon and met the alien's gaze. "Why would I chase you twice?" he replied, his voice steady and clear. The creature paused as if processing his response. Its glowing eyes dimmed slightly, and for a fleeting moment, it almost looked confused. Then, without another word, it turned and vanished into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. No one spoke for several seconds. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of their breathing. Finally, Ethan broke the spell. "What just happened?" he stammered, lowering his rifle. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, though his tone suggested otherwise. There was something in his expression, a flicker of understanding perhaps, or maybe just curiosity. Whatever it was, it unsettled the others. Laura straightened up, brushing dust off her gloves. "That thing, it wasn't attacking us, it was asking questions." "And Daniel answered it," Samantha added, glancing at him warily. "What did you mean by why would I chase you twice?" Daniel hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I meant exactly what I said. If they wanted to hurt us, they'd have done it already. Running away would only make us look weak, or worse, provoke them into doing something we can't handle." His explanation did little to ease the tension, but no one argued. They all knew Daniel well enough to trust his judgment, even if they didn't fully understand it. "Well, whatever that thing was," Ethan muttered, "it's gone now. Should we keep looking around?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "But stay alert. We don't know what else might be out there." With renewed caution, the team resumed their search, though the encounter lingered in their minds like a shadow. None of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the alien's sudden appearance was only the beginning of something much bigger. And deep down, Daniel couldn't help but wonder, why had the creature asked that question? And more importantly, why had his answer seemed to satisfy it? Whatever the truth was, it wasn't going to reveal itself easily. The team returned to the base in silence, their minds heavy with unanswered questions. The underground facility was a maze of narrow corridors and dimly lit rooms, carved out of Arendor 7's rocky terrain. It wasn't much, but it was all that remained of humanity's presence on this desolate planet. The air inside was stale, recycled endlessly by aging machines, and the walls were lined with rusted metal panels that groaned under the weight of time. As they entered the main hall, Commander Robert Hayes stood waiting for them. He was a grizzled man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and a face etched with years of stress and responsibility. His uniform was immaculate, though it hung loosely on his frame, a testament to the toll this mission had taken on him. When he saw Daniel approach, his sharp gray eyes narrowed. "Well?" Hayes asked, his voice clipped. "What did you find?" Daniel hesitated, glancing at Laura before answering. "We found traces of the energy signatures we've been tracking. They're stronger near the old colony's command center, but there's more." Hayes crossed his arms. "Go on." "We encountered one of them," Daniel said simply. "An alien." The room fell silent. Hayes stared at him, his expression unreadable. Behind him, several soldiers stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to the conversation. Even Laura shifted uncomfortably, clutching her datapad. Tightly. An alien. Hayes repeated slowly. And? It didn't attack us, Daniel continued. It spoke to us, telepathically. This revelation caused murmurs to ripple through the crowd. Hayes raised a hand, silencing them. Spoke? What did it say? Daniel recounted the encounter as plainly as possible, describing the creature's appearance and its cryptic question. Why don't you flee? He also shared his own response. Why would I chase you twice? When he finished, Hayes frowned deeply. You mean to tell me you let an alien walk away without engaging it? Without gathering intel or testing its capabilities? It didn't give us a chance to do either, Daniel replied calmly. It asked a question, got an answer, and left. There was no hostility, sir. Just curiosity. Hayes stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. Curiosity doesn't win wars, Lieutenant. These creatures are here for a reason. If they're not attacking yet, it's because they're planning something. You should have taken the shot. There was nothing to shoot at, Daniel countered, his tone firm but respectful. It disappeared before we could react. Besides, chasing after it blindly might have made things worse. We don't know what they're capable of or what they want. Hayes glared at him for a long moment, then turned abruptly and walked away, barking orders to nearby soldiers. Double the patrols. I want every inch of this base secured. And someone get me a full report on those energy readings. Daniel watched him go, frustration simmering beneath the surface. He knew Hayes was under immense pressure, but his refusal to consider other possibilities was dangerous. Turning back to his team, he saw the same unease reflected in their faces. You think he's right? Ethan asked quietly, breaking the silence. Should we have gone after it? No, Daniel said firmly. We don't know enough about these aliens to start provoking them. For now, our best move is to stay cautious and gather information. Laura nodded in agreement. I think Daniel's instincts were spot on. That alien wasn't trying to intimidate us. It was asking a legitimate question, maybe even testing us. Samantha frowned. Testing us for what? To see if we'd panic? Attack? Or to gauge whether we're worth communicating with, Laura suggested. Think about it. If they're advanced enough to travel between stars, they must have ways of observing us. Why show themselves now unless they're looking for something? Her words hung in the air, sparking a mix of dread and curiosity among the group. Daniel glanced at her thoughtfully. You might be onto something. Whatever they're here for, it's bigger than just us. Later that evening, Daniel found himself sitting alone in the mess hall, picking at a tray of bland rations. The room was mostly empty, save for a few scattered soldiers who ate in silence, their faces pale with exhaustion. Despite the quiet, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a sensation that had lingered since their encounter with the alien. He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice Laura approaching until she slid into the seat across from him. She placed a cup of coffee on the table and offered him a small smile. You look like you haven't slept in days, she said lightly. I feel like it, Daniel admitted, rubbing his temples. Too much on my mind. About the alien? Yeah, about everything. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. Hayes thinks I made a mistake letting it go. Maybe he's right, but something tells me shooting first wouldn't have solved anything. Laura sipped her coffee, considering his words. You handled it well, better than most people would. That alien didn't expect such a calm response. It seemed almost surprised. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Surprised? By what I said? Maybe. She set her cup down and leaned forward, lowering her voice. I've been analyzing the data from the command center. Those energy spikes we detected, they're not random. They form patterns, almost like signals. And based on what little I've pieced together, I think they're coming from somewhere deep beneath the planet's surface. Signals? Daniel echoed. You mean like communication? Possibly. Or maybe something else entirely. Her expression grew serious. But here's the thing. Whatever's causing those signals isn't natural, it's artificial. And it's powerful. Powerful enough to destabilize entire ecosystems if misused. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. You think the aliens are connected to it? It's too coincidental not to be, Laura replied. They showed up right where the energy readings are strongest. Maybe they're using it or trying to stop it. Stop it? Daniel frowned. From what? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I don't know yet, but if I had to guess, I'd say they're running from it. The idea hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. Running from it? You mean they're refugees? It's a possibility, Laura admitted. Think about it. If they're advanced enough to build ships capable of interstellar travel, why come to a dead-end planet like this? Unless they're desperate. Daniel stared at her, the implications sinking in. If the aliens weren't invaders but fugitives, then humanity's role in this conflict suddenly became far more complicated. Were they supposed to help these creatures? Fight alongside them? Or stand aside and let them deal with whatever threat they were fleeing? Before he could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway outside. A soldier burst into the mess hall, his face pale and wide-eyed. "Lieutenant Carter," he called out urgently. "You need to see this." Daniel stood immediately, his heart pounding. "What is it?" "It's the perimeter cameras," the soldier stammered. "We caught something moving out there, something big." Without another word, Daniel followed him to the control room, Laura close behind. Inside, a group of technicians huddled around a bank of monitors, their faces illuminated by the flickering screens. One of them pointed to a grainy image displayed on the largest monitor. "There," he said, his voice trembling. It came out of nowhere. Daniel squinted at the screen. At first it looked like static, a blur of shadows and light. But then he saw it. A massive shape, towering over the landscape, its outline jagged and insect-like. It moved with unnatural speed, darting between the ruins before vanishing into the horizon. "That's not the same one we saw earlier," Laura whispered, her voice barely audible. "No," Daniel agreed, his jaw tightening. "It's bigger, stronger, and faster," added Ethan, who had joined them unnoticed. "Whatever it is, it's hunting." The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled over them. If the aliens weren't the hunters, but the hunted, then humanity's survival depended on understanding not only who these creatures were, but also what was pursuing them. Daniel turned to Laura, his expression grim. "Keep working on those signals, find out where they're coming from. We need answers, and fast." She nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "I'll do my best." As the others dispersed, Daniel lingered by the monitors, staring at the frozen image of the massive shape. Somewhere out there, beyond the safety of their base, forces far greater than humanity were at play. And whether they liked it or not, they were now part of the game. For better or worse, their next move would define their fate. The next morning, the base was alive with tension. Soldiers moved quickly through the corridors, their boots echoing against the metal floors. Supplies were being rationed more strictly, and patrols had doubled in size. Everyone knew something big was coming. They just didn't know what or when. The encounter with the alien, combined with the mysterious signals and the sighting of the larger creature, had left everyone on edge. Daniel sat in the briefing room, staring at a map of Arendor 7 spread out on the table. It was marked with red dots indicating areas where energy spikes had been detected, as well as blue lines representing patrol routes. Laura stood beside him, pointing to one of the red dots near the planet's equator. "This is where the strongest signal is coming from," she explained, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If we want answers, we need to go there." Commander Hayes paced behind them, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He stopped abruptly and leaned over the map, his sharp eyes scanning it. "You're suggesting we send a team into uncharted territory based on some hunch?" "It's not a hunch," Laura replied firmly. "The data supports it. Whatever's causing those signals is artificial and powerful. If we ignore it, we risk being caught off guard." Hayes straightened up and turned to Daniel. "What do you think, Lieutenant?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, weighing his words carefully. "I agree with Dr. Bennett. We can't keep waiting for things to happen. If the aliens are involved, they've already shown they're willing to communicate, at least indirectly. Going to the source might give us a chance to understand what's going on." Hayes let out a long sigh, rubbing his temples. Finally, he nodded curtly. Fine. But you'll take a small team, no more than 4 people, and you'll stay in constant contact with the base. If anything goes wrong, I'm pulling you out immediately. Understood, Daniel said, relief washing over him. He glanced at Laura, who gave him a small, grateful smile. By midday, the team was ready. Alongside Daniel and Laura were Corporal Ethan Blake and Medic Samantha Cole. They carried minimal gear, just enough to survive a few days in the harsh environment of Arendor 7. Their destination was a series of caves located deep within the Bao planet's rocky terrain, close to the epicenter of the energy signals. As they set out, the air grew colder, and the wind picked up, whipping dust into their faces. The landscape became increasingly barren, with jagged cliffs rising on either side of their path. Despite the discomfort, no one complained. Each step brought them closer to answers, or danger. After hours of trekking, they reached the mouth of the largest cave. Its entrance yawned wide, dark and foreboding, like the maw of some ancient beast. Inside, the air was damp and smelled faintly of sulfur. Laura switched on her scanner, its soft beeping cutting through the oppressive silence. "The signal's stronger here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We're close." Daniel nodded, signaling for Ethan and Samantha to take positions on either side of the entrance. He drew his weapon but kept it lowered, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Stay alert," he murmured. "We don't know what's waiting for us." They moved cautiously into the cave, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls glistened with moisture, and strange symbols etched into the rock caught the light. Laura paused to examine them, running, her fingers over the carvings. "These look deliberate," she said softly. "Like someone, or something, made them intentionally." Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. It grew louder, almost deafening, until it seemed to press against their skulls. Ethan raised his rifle, scanning the shadows nervously. "What the hell is that?" he demanded, his voice tight with fear. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, gripping his weapon tighter. "But whatever it is, it's close." Suddenly the hum stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Then, without warning, the ground shook violently. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling and the team scrambled to find cover. Laura stumbled, her scanner slipping from her hands and clattering to the ground. "Stay together!" Daniel shouted, helping her to her feet. "We need to move deeper. Now!" They pressed onward, following the narrow tunnel as it twisted and turned. The air grew heavier, and the temperature dropped sharply. Ahead, a faint glow illuminated the passage, casting strange shadows on the walls. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves standing at the edge of a massive cavern. The sight took their breath away. In the center of the chamber floated a sphere of pulsating dark energy, suspended in midair by an invisible force. It radiated waves of power that made the hair on their arms stand on end. Surrounding it were clusters of mechanical drones, their sleek bodies glinting in the dim light. They hovered silently, their single glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. Laura stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. This is incredible. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." "Careful," Daniel warned, his voice low. "Those drones don't look friendly." As if on cue, the drones began to move, spreading out in a loose formation. One of them emitted a high-pitched whine and the others followed suit, creating a cacophony of sound that echoed through the cavern. "We need to get closer to the sphere," Laura insisted, her voice urgent. "It's the source of the signals. I'm sure of it." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Ethan asked, his rifle trained on the nearest drone. "They're not just going to let us waltz up to it." Daniel thought quickly, his mind racing. "Blake, Cole, cover us. Dr. Bennett, stick close to me. We'll make a run for it." Without waiting for further discussion, he grabbed Laura's arm and sprinted toward the sphere, weaving between the drones as they fired beams of searing light. Ethan and Samantha provided covering fire, their shots ricocheting off the drones, metallic shells. The noise was deafening and the heat from the blasts singed the air. Somehow they managed to reach the sphere. Laura knelt beside it, her hands trembling as she connected her scanner to a panel embedded in the ground. The device beeped frantically, overwhelmed by the sheer amount of energy coursing through the chamber. "It's a weapon," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the din. "A weapon capable of tearing apart space-time itself." "A weapon?" Daniel echoed, his stomach sinking. "Who built it, and why?" Before she could answer, a loud screech echoed through the cavern. The drones halted their attack, retreating into the shadows. From the darkness emerged one of the insect-like aliens, smaller and less imposing than the ones they'd encountered before. It moved slowly, its glowing eyes flickering erratically. "It's trying to communicate," Laura said, lowering her scanner. "I can feel it." Images flooded her mind, visions of destruction, fire, and endless pursuit. She staggered back, clutching her head. Daniel caught her before she fell, steadying her with a firm grip. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice tense. "They're running," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They're running from something, far worse than us." The realization hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. These creatures weren't invaders, they were refugees, fleeing a force so powerful it could annihilate entire civilizations. And now, humanity was caught in the middle of their desperate struggle. The alien tilted its head, studying them intently. Then, in a burst of telepathic communication, it urged them to destroy the sphere, to render the weapon useless before it fell into the wrong hands. Daniel looked at Laura, then at the rest of his team. There was no time to debate, no room for hesitation. Whatever was coming, they couldn't let it reach the sphere. "Do it," he said finally, his voice resolute. "Blow it up." Laura nodded, her hands shaking as she worked to rig the device with explosives. Ethan and Samantha kept watch, their weapons ready for another wave of drones. The alien lingered nearby, watching silently as the humans prepared to dismantle the very thing it had once protected. When the charges were set, Daniel gave the order to retreat. They ran back through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing in the suffocating darkness. Behind them, the cavern began to collapse, the sphere imploding in a brilliant flash of light that sent shockwaves rippling through the ground. As they emerged into the open air, the team collapsed onto the rocky soil, gasping for breath. The alien appeared moments later, its form shimmering faintly in the fading sunlight. It regarded them for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the horizon, leaving only silence in its wake. Daniel stared after it, his mind reeling. They had survived for now, but the war was far from over. Whatever the aliens were fleeing, it was still out there, lurking in the vastness of space, and sooner or later, it would come for them too. The explosion in the cavern sent a shockwave rippling across the planet's surface, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Dust and debris rained down from the sky as the team struggled to regain their footing. Though they were far enough away, to avoid being caught in the blast, the force of it still left them breathless. For several moments no one spoke. They simply sat there, staring at the horizon, their minds trying to process what had just happened. Daniel was the first to break the silence. "Is it done?" he asked, his voice hoarse from shouting over the noise. Laura nodded, her face pale but determined. "It's gone. The sphere. It's destroyed." Ethan let out a shaky laugh, lowering his rifle. "Well, that's one way. To make sure no one uses it." Samantha shook her head, brushing dirt off her uniform. "I don't think we've seen the last of whatever's chasing those aliens. Destroying the weapon might have slowed them down, but it won't stop them." Daniel glanced at her, his expression grim. "You're right. But for now, we've bought ourselves some time. That's more than we had before." The group fell silent again, each lost in their own thoughts. The alien's warning lingered in their minds, a vivid reminder that they were dealing with forces far beyond human comprehension. Whatever was coming, it wasn't just a threat to the aliens, it was a danger to everyone. Back at the base, Commander Hayes wasted no time calling an emergency meeting. Soldiers and scientists gathered in the main hall, their faces tense with anticipation. Hayes stood at the front of the room, his posture rigid and his eyes scanning the crowd. "Lieutenant Carter," he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Report." Daniel stepped forward, his gaze steady despite the weight of the commander's stare. He recounted everything that had happened, the journey to the cavern, the discovery of the sphere, and its eventual destruction. When he mentioned the alien's telepathic warning, a ripple of unease spread through the room. "So you're telling me," Hayes said slowly, "that these creatures aren't our enemies? That they're running from something worse?" "That's correct, sir," Daniel replied. "They're refugees, not invaders. And whatever's pursuing them is powerful enough to destroy entire civilizations." Hayes frowned deeply, rubbing his temples. "This complicates things. If what you're saying is true, then we're facing a threat unlike anything we've ever encountered." Laura stepped forward, clutching her datapad. "Commander, the sphere wasn't just a weapon, it was a key to unlocking technology, capable of manipulating space-time itself. Whoever or whatever is chasing the aliens wants that power. Now that the sphere is gone, they'll either retreat or escalate their efforts to find another way to harness it." "And if they come here?" Hayes asked sharply. "What then?" "We prepare," Daniel said firmly. "We fortify the base, gather intelligence, and work on establishing communication with the aliens. They know more about this enemy than we do. If we can earn their trust, they might help us defend ourselves." Hayes studied him for a long moment, then turned to address the room. "Double all defensive measures. I want every soldier armed and ready. Scientists focus on analyzing any remaining data from the sphere. And Lieutenant Carter, keep trying to make contact with those creatures. We need answers, and we need them fast." The meeting ended with a flurry of activity as everyone scrambled to carry out their orders. Daniel watched them go, his mind racing. Despite Hayes' outward confidence, Daniel could see the fear lurking beneath the surface. This situation was unprecedented, and no amount of preparation could guarantee survival against an unknown enemy. Later that evening, Daniel found Laura in the lab, hunched over her workstation. Her goggles were perched on top of her head, and her fingers flew across the keyboard as she sifted through fragments of data recovered from the sphere. The glow of the monitor illuminated her tired face, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. "You should get some rest," Daniel said gently, leaning against the doorway. She glanced up briefly but didn't stop typing. "I will. After I finish this." He crossed the room and pulled up a chair beside her. "You're pushing yourself too hard. What are you even looking for?" "Clues," she replied, pausing to rub her temples. "Anything that might tell us more about the aliens, or what they're running from. There's so much we don't understand." Daniel nodded, watching the screen flicker with lines of code and fragmented images. "Do you think they'll come back? The aliens, I mean." "I hope so," Laura admitted. "If they're willing to talk, we might finally get some answers. But if they're too afraid or too desperate, they might leave us behind." Before Daniel could respond, an alarm blared through the base, startling them both. Red lights flashed overhead, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Laura grabbed her goggles and Daniel bolted to his feet. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice tinged with panic. "Stay here," he ordered, already heading for the door. "I'll find out." He sprinted through the corridors, dodging, soldiers rushing toward their posts. The control room was chaos, screens flashing, voices shouting, and technicians frantically working to identify the source of the disturbance. Hayes stood at the center of it all, barking commands. "Report," Daniel demanded as he approached. One of the perimeter cameras picked up movement, a technician replied, pointing to a monitor. "Something big, bigger than the drones we saw earlier." Daniel leaned closer, studying the grainy footage. At first it looked like static, but then a shape emerged from the darkness. It was massive, its form shifting and writhing like smoke given life. Tentacle-like appendages lashed out, tearing through the ruins as if searching for something. "It's hunting," Hayes muttered, his voice barely audible over the commotion. "But what?" No one answered. The creature's movements were erratic, almost frenzied. as though it sensed the destruction of the sphere and was reacting to its loss. Whatever it wasn't alone. Smaller shapes flitted around it, darting in and out of view like insects swarming a predator. "We need to evacuate the outer sectors," Daniel said urgently. "If that thing gets too close, we won't be able to hold it off." "Agreed," Hayes replied, turning to issue orders. "Get everyone inside the inner perimeter. Seal off the tunnels." As the evacuation began, Daniel hurried back to the lab to check on Laura. She was still at her workstation, but her face was pale, her hands trembling as she stared at the screen. "What is it?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. She pointed to the monitor where a series of symbols had appeared. They pulsed faintly as if alive. They're coordinates, or maybe a message. I'm not sure yet." "Coordinates for what?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But if I'm reading this right, they lead somewhere deep underground, deeper than the cavern we destroyed." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "You think there's more down there?" "It's possible," Laura said quietly. "If the sphere was part of a larger system, there could be other components buried beneath the surface, components that might still be active." Hayes entered the lab just as she finished speaking, his expression grim. "We've got trouble outside. Whatever that thing is, it's moving toward the base." "How long until it reaches us?" Daniel asked. "Hours, maybe less," Hayes replied, "which means we don't have time to sit around guessing. Lieutenant, take your team and investigate those coordinates. If there's something else down there, we need to know about it, and neutralize it if necessary." Daniel hesitated, glancing at Laura. "Are you sure about this? Sending us into the tunnels while that thing is heading straight for us?" "It's a risk," Hayes admitted. "But it's better than sitting here waiting to die. Now move." The team regrouped quickly, gathering supplies and weapons before descending into the tunnels. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper, the walls closing in around them. Laura led the way, her scanner guiding them through the labyrinthine passages. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the planet itself was resisting their presence. "This place gives me the creeps," Ethan muttered, his rifle raised cautiously. "Feels like we're walking into a trap." "Maybe we are," Samantha replied softly. "But if there's something down here that could help us fight back, we can't afford to ignore it." They reached a large chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a structure resembling the sphere they had destroyed, though smaller and partially buried in rubble. Laura approached it cautiously, her scanner beeping rapidly. "It's dormant," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "But it's connected to the same network as the sphere. If we activate it, we might be able to use it against whatever's coming," Daniel finished, his mind racing. "But how?" Laura hesitated, her fingers hovering over the controls. "I'm not sure. Activating it could draw attention, not just from the creature outside, but from whoever built it in the first place." Before anyone could decide, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The ground shook violently and dust rained down from above. Somewhere in the distance, they heard the unmistakable sound of something breaking through the tunnels. "They've found us," Ethan said, his voice tight with fear. Daniel glanced at Laura, then at the device. "Do it," he said finally. "Activate it. Whatever happens next, we'll deal with it together." Laura nodded, her hands trembling as she worked the controls. The structure began to hum, its surface glowing faintly. As the light intensified, the rumbling grew louder, until the entire chamber seemed to vibrate with energy. The chamber erupted into chaos as the creature surged forward, its massive form casting long shadows across the walls. Its glowing eyes locked onto the team, and it let out another deafening roar that shook the very ground beneath their feet. The air was thick with tension, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the cavern like a storm. Daniel fired his weapon, aiming for the creature's glowing eyes, the only weak spot he could see. Ethan and Samantha followed suit, their shots ricocheting off the creature's armored hide. Laura stayed near the device, her hands trembling as she worked to stabilize its activation sequence. She knew they wouldn't last long if the machine didn't come online soon. "Keep firing," Daniel shouted over the noise, reloading his rifle. "We can't let it get close." Ethan nodded, his face pale but determined. Got it, sir. The creature moved with terrifying speed despite its size, lashing out with its tentacle-like appendages. One of them slammed into the wall beside Ethan, sending chunks of rock flying. He dove out of the way just in time, narrowly avoiding being crushed. Samantha scrambled to help him up while continuing to fire at the beast. "We're running out of ammo," she yelled, her voice tight with panic. Daniel gritted his teeth, scanning the room for any advantage they could use. The chamber was wide but cluttered with debris, remnants of whatever civilization had built this place. If they could lure the creature into a trap, maybe they'd have a chance. "Fall back," he ordered, gesturing toward a narrow passage on the far side of the room. "Draw it away from the machine." The team obeyed without hesitation, retreating toward the passage while keeping their weapons trained on the creature. It hesitated for a moment, its glowing eyes flickering between the humans and the device behind them. Then, with a roar, it charged after them, its massive body smashing through the rubble in pursuit. As they entered the passage, Daniel turned to Ethan. "Seal it off. Use whatever you've got." Ethan nodded and pulled a small explosive charge from his pack. He set it quickly against the wall and pressed the detonator. With a loud crack, the ceiling collapsed, blocking the passage and trapping the creature on the other side. For now. "That won't hold it for long," Ethan warned, wiping sweat from his brow. "What's the plan?" Daniel glanced at Laura, who was still working frantically at the controls. "How much longer?" he asked. "Almost there," she replied, her voice strained. "Just a few more seconds." The ground trembled again as the creature began tearing through the rubble, its roars growing louder with each passing second. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Daniel raised his rifle, ready to defend the machine if necessary. Finally, the device hummed to life, its surface glowing brighter than ever. A pulse of energy shot outward, enveloping the chamber in a blinding light. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. The creature, the team, even the air itself. Then, with a deafening crack, the energy coalesced into a shimmering barrier that surrounded the machine, sealing it off from the rest of the chamber. Laura slumped to the ground, exhausted, but relieved. "It's active," she whispered, "but I don't know how long it'll last." Before anyone could respond, the creature broke through the rubble, its glowing eyes narrowing as it studied the barrier. It lunged forward, slamming one of its appendages against the shimmering wall, but the barrier held firm. Frustrated, it let out another roar and began pacing around the chamber, searching for a way in. "What does it want?" Samantha asked, lowering her weapon slightly. "Why is it so obsessed with that thing?" "It's not just a machine," Laura explained, her voice barely audible over the creature's growls. "It's part of a network, a system designed to control or manipulate space-time. If it gets access to it, it could undo everything we've done." Daniel frowned, his mind racing. "So it's not just hunting the aliens. It's after the technology, too." "Exactly," Laura said, nodding. "And if it succeeds, none of us will be safe." The creature suddenly stopped pacing and turned its attention back to the team. Its glowing eyes flickered and the air around them grew colder. Then, without warning, it let out a piercing screech that sent waves of pain through their heads. Daniel clutched his ears, struggling to stay upright as the sound overwhelmed him. "It's trying to break our defenses," Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the noise. "We can't fight something like this." Daniel forced himself to focus, his vision swimming as he scanned the room for options. The barrier was holding, for now, but they couldn't rely on it indefinitely. They needed a way to either destroy the creature or drive it away permanently. "Laura," he called out, his voice hoarse. "Is there anything else you can do with that machine? Anything at all?" She hesitated, her face pale. "There might be, but it's risky. If I overload the system, it could collapse the entire chamber. Or worse." "Do it," Daniel said firmly. "We don't have a choice." Laura nodded, her hands shaking as she approached the barrier. She placed her palm against it, closing her eyes as she focused. The machine responded immediately, its glow intensifying until it illuminated every corner of the chamber. The creature recoiled, its glowing eyes dimming slightly as if sensing the danger. What are you doing? Samantha asked, her voice tinged with fear. I'm amplifying the energy output, Laura replied, her voice strained. If I can channel enough power into a single burst, it might be enough to drive it away, or at least incapacitate it. But what about us? Ethan demanded. Won't it kill us too? It's a calculated risk, Daniel said, stepping closer to Laura. Trust her. The creature recovered quickly, slamming repeatedly against the barrier as the energy within the machine reached critical levels. Sparks flew, and the ground shook violently beneath their feet. Laura's face was pale, her breathing shallow as she poured all her concentration into maintaining control. Hold together, Daniel muttered under his breath, raising his weapon once more. Just a little longer. With a final surge of effort, Laura released the energy in a massive burst that engulfed the chamber. The creature let out a deafening shriek as the wave hit it, its form dissolving into smoke before vanishing entirely. The barrier flickered and collapsed, leaving the team standing amidst the ruins of the chamber, gasping for air. For several moments, no one spoke. The silence was almost unbearable after the chaos that had preceded it. Finally, Ethan broke the spell. Did we win? He asked, lowering his rifle cautiously. I think so, Daniel replied, though his tone suggested uncertainty. For now. Laura sank to the ground, her hands trembling as she stared at the remnants of the machine. I overloaded it. Completely. Whatever was left of the network, it's gone. And the creature? Samantha asked, glancing nervously at the empty space where it had been. Gone too, Daniel said, his voice low, at least for now. Back at the base, the mood was somber. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, everyone knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The alien creatures hadn't returned, and there was no sign of the larger force pursuing them. But the destruction of the machine and the disappearance of the creature raised more questions than answers. Commander Hayes listened intently as Daniel gave his report, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with concern. You've done well, he admitted. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Whatever those creatures were running from, it's still out there. And sooner or later it'll come, for us. Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. We'll be ready. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then turned to address the rest of the team. In the meantime, we need to prepare. Strengthen our defenses, gather intelligence, and keep an eye on the skies. If they come back, if anything comes back, we need to be ready. As the meeting ended, Daniel found Laura sitting alone in the lab, staring blankly at her datapad. He pulled up a chair beside her, offering a small smile. You did good out there, he said softly. We wouldn't have made it without you. She looked up, her eyes red from exhaustion. I just hope it was enough, that thing. It felt like it wasn't alone. Like it was part of something bigger. Daniel sighed, leaning back in his chair. It probably is. But we've bought ourselves some time. Time to figure out what we're dealing with, and how to stop it. Laura nodded slowly, her gaze distant. Do you think the aliens will come back? To thank us? Or warn us? I don't know, Daniel admitted. But if they do, we'll listen. Because right now, they're the only ones who truly understand what's coming. Outside, the wind howled across the desolate landscape, carrying whispers of storms yet to come. Humanity had survived for now, but the war was far from over. Somewhere beyond the stars, forces unimaginable waited, watching and waiting for their next move. And when they arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. Days passed and the base settled into an uneasy calm. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the weight of what they had faced lingered in the air like a storm cloud refusing to break. Soldiers patrolled the perimeter with renewed vigilance, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Scientists worked tirelessly in the labs, analyzing fragments of data recovered from the destroyed machine and piecing together clues about the alien creatures and the force that pursued them. Daniel spent most of his time walking the corridors of the base, checking on his team and ensuring everyone stayed sharp. He knew morale was low. Fear had a way of creeping into even the strongest minds. But he also knew they couldn't afford to let it take hold. Whatever was coming next, humanity would need every ounce of courage and determination it could muster. Laura, meanwhile, had thrown herself into her work. She spent hours poring over readings and simulations, trying to make sense of the technology they had encountered. Though she had managed to overload the machine in the cavern, traces of its energy signature still lingered in the atmosphere around the planet. It was as if the device's destruction had left behind echoes, reminders of the power it once wielded. One evening, as Daniel entered the lab, he found Laura staring at a monitor, her face pale and drawn. "Anything new?" he asked gently, pulling up a chair beside her. She nodded slowly, pointing to the screen. "The energy readings, they're fading, but before they disappear completely, I think I've isolated something. A pattern. It's faint, but it's there." "What kind of pattern?" Daniel leaned closer, studying the lines of code scrolling across the display. "It's almost like a map," Laura explained, her voice tinged with both excitement and dread. "A map of where the aliens might have come from, and where they're heading, where they're going." Daniel frowned. "You mean they're still running?" "Yes." Laura turned to face him, her eyes wide. "They haven't stopped. Whatever is chasing them, it's relentless. And if we don't find a way to help them, it'll catch up sooner or later." Daniel sat back, rubbing his temples. "So what do you suggest? Follow them?" "I don't know," Laura admitted. "But we can't just sit here and wait for disaster to strike again. If we can track their path, maybe we can intercept them, or at least warn them about what's happening." "Here." Before Daniel could respond, the door to the lab slid open, and Commander Hayes stepped inside. His expression was grim, his shoulders tense as if carrying the weight of the world. "Lieutenant Carter," he said, his voice low. "We've got company." Outside, the sky was dark, the twin suns obscured by thick clouds of dust. A group of soldiers stood near the edge of the base, their weapons raised as they watched the horizon. Emerging from the shadows came several of the insect-like aliens, their glowing eyes pulsing softly in the gloom. They moved cautiously, their forms shimmering faintly as if unsure whether to trust the humans waiting for them. Daniel stepped forward, raising a hand to signal his team to lower their weapons. "Hold your fire," he ordered firmly. Then, turning to the nearest alien, he spoke clearly. "We're not your enemy." For a moment, nothing happened. The aliens simply stood there, their heads tilted as if studying him. Then, one of them, the largest among them, stepped closer. Its voice echoed in their minds, cold yet somehow less hostile than before. "You destroyed the machine," it said, its telepathic words reverberating through the group. "Why?" "To stop the thing hunting you," Daniel replied without hesitation. "We didn't want it getting its hands on whatever you were protecting." The alien paused, its glowing eyes dimming slightly. "You acted wisely. But destruction will not stop it forever." "We know," Daniel admitted. "That's why we're trying to understand what's coming and how to fight it. Can you tell us more? About the creature? About why it's after you?" The alien hesitated, its form flickering faintly. "It seeks control, power beyond comprehension. Once we guarded the machines it now hunts. We failed. Now it hunts us too." Laura stepped forward, clutching her datapad tightly. "Is there a way to stop it? To destroy it?" "There is no destruction," the alien replied cryptically. "Only containment. You must learn to see the truth, to understand the balance." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the alien turned and gestured toward the horizon. From the darkness emerged a sleek metallic ship, its surface gleaming faintly in the dim light. The aliens began moving toward it, their forms dissolving into the air as they boarded. "Wait!" Daniel called out, stepping forward. "Where are you going? What should we do next?" The lead alien hesitated, turning back to face him. "You chose wisely," it said, its voice echoing faintly. "So did we. Trust yourselves. And remember, fear blinds. Understanding empowers." With that, The ship rose silently into the sky, disappearing into the clouds. The soldiers stared after it, their weapons still lowered but their grips tight. No one spoke for several moments, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. Back inside the base, the mood was subdued. Hayes called another meeting, this time including not only the soldiers but also the scientists and engineers who had been working tirelessly to prepare for the unknown. Daniel recounted the conversation with the aliens, emphasizing their cryptic warning about understanding and balance. "They're leaving us to deal with this on our own," Hayes muttered, rubbing his temples. "Great." "Not entirely," Laura interjected, holding up her datapad. "I think I've figured out part of what they meant. The energy signatures, they're not just remnants of the machine, they're coordinates leading somewhere far beyond Arendor 7. "Coordinates to where?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with unease. "To wherever the aliens are heading," Laura replied, "and possibly to the source of the threat itself." Hayes frowned deeply, his gaze fixed on her. "You're suggesting we follow them? Into deep space with what resources?" "We don't have much choice," Daniel said firmly. "If we stay here, we're sitting ducks. At least out there we have a chance to fight back. Or find allies." Hayes studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine. But we move carefully. Prep the ships, gather supplies, and make sure everyone knows what's at stake. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about finding answers." As the meeting ended, Daniel found himself standing alone in the control room, staring at the monitors displaying the coordinates. The journey ahead would be dangerous, filled with uncertainty and risk. But deep down, he felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and somehow they had always found a way to endure. Behind him, Laura approached, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think we're ready for this?" "No," Daniel admitted, turning to face her. "But we don't have to be. Sometimes all you need is the will to keep fighting, even when the odds are stacked against you." Laura smiled faintly, nodding. "Then let's get to work." Together, they walked out of the control room, their steps steady despite the weight of the task ahead. Outside, the wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying whispers of storms yet to come. But for now, humanity had a plan, and a fragile thread of hope to cling to. Somewhere beyond the stars, forces unimaginable waited, watching and testing, and when they arrived, humanity would be ready, not just to survive but to stand and fight.